Hey, what's up, everybody? Chris Trapasso here, and welcome to the first episode of what I'm calling All 32, which will be a pretty fast-paced show that I will give analysis on all 32 NFL teams on a weekly basis. So if you are watching this show, you probably have a favorite NFL team. I'm going to talk about that team. I will give you my thoughts. I will give you stat nuggets, things that I've observed on film from a team perspective or individually, specific players that have stood out good or bad to me over these first 3 weeks of the NFL season. I'm hopefully going to do this once a week. And I will go division by division. Let's get right into it. I will start in my backyard in the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills. And if you see me looking over here, I just have my notes because I can't keep all 32 teams, all those nuggets just in my head. I'll start with the Buffalo Bills with the AFC East. James Cook. I think James Cook is running the football better this season through 3 games, and it's been only 3 games, than he ever has in the NFL. And I'll give you some numbers to back that up. He is at the highest missed tackle force rate that he's ever been in the NFL, almost exactly the same as where he was on like a little over 100 carries in his rookie season. His missed tackle force rate for James Cook right now is 20.7%. He was about 3 percentage points lower than that last year. Sure, it was across the whole season, and we have to think about sample size. 5 percentage points better than when he broke out with that first 1,100-yard season in 2023. He's also running with more power. His yards after contact per rush figure right now for James Cook, who's like, we think of him as a speedster and a big play specialist. He's not very big. Is 3.74. And for context, the best running backs in the NFL across an entire season are usually right around there. Like if you're close to 4 yards after contact per rush, you are like Derrick Henry, or you are one of the best contact balance power backs in the league. Only 3 games in, but he's gotten a lot of carries. It's not like he's carried the ball 20 times and all these numbers are inflated because he's barely touched the football. So James Cook, and also too, 7 carries of 10 or more yards, which is tied with J.K. Dobbins, which I'll get to later when we get down to the AFC West and the Broncos, and Jonathan Taylor, who's leading the NFL in rushing. So James Cook is maintaining that splash play ability that we've seen and what has kind of grown into his trademark, but he's running with more elusiveness, which was always kind of my knock on him, that even in these last 2 seasons, I thought, he wasn't crazy elusive. He was hitting big plays, and he was an asset in the pass game, but was not creating a lot after contact or making a lot of defenders miss. And he has fixed those 2 weaknesses to his game. He's running the football better now than I think he ever has. All right, moving down the AFC East, New York Jets. The Jets, I mean, speaking of running backs and missed tackles forced and all that, Breece Hall, who is uber talented, he has that feature back frame. He was a 2nd-round pick just a few years ago. We know he ran sub 4.4 at the combine. I think he's like a top 7 to 10 talent at the running back position in today's NFL. He has 2 missed tackles forced entering week 4, and that's not necessarily on him. The blocking has not been great. Obviously, losing Elijah Vera Tucker before the season, not a huge help. They have 2nd-year blocker Olu Fashanu at left tackle. They have 1st-round pick Armand Membu at right tackle. I think those 2 will eventually be very good. It's just losing Elijah Vera Tucker. They had to shuffle around, Joe Tippmann, Josh Myers on the inside. They're not blocking particularly well, but only 2 missed tackles forced for Breece Hall. That's a little bit on him too. I mean, there's running backs, Jalen Warren, Jonathan Taylor. Those guys are up in the teens already. They're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. For Breece Hall, 2 missed tackles forced just does not align with how talented of a running back he is. All right, Miami Dolphins, staying in the AFC East. The Dolphins right now are last in the NFL in non-garbage time EPA allowed per play on defense. So take away any garbage time, like in the blowout loss to the Colts. I'm not factoring that in week 1. Not factoring in any of their big margins that they've had. Just when the game has been relatively within reach, so to speak, for Tua and the offense, which has not been good, they are allowing more EPA per play than any other defense in the NFL. And the note that I have here, it's not surprising. Their top 2 cornerbacks, Rasul Douglas, whom they signed like right before the season and looked for as good of a leader as he was in Buffalo. And then before that in Green Bay, Philly, he looked cooked by the end of last season. He's well into his 30s now. It's Rasul Douglas and Jack Jones, who's talented. He's probably the most talented player outside of Minkah Fitzpatrick in the back 7 for Miami. But he's obviously had his off-field problems, maturity issues. But if those are your top 2 corners, other guys are Storm Duck. There's a lot of players that feel like practice squad level on this Miami Dolphins defense. They have some talent up front. Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb. Jalen Phillips has played well coming off the Achilles injury. Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson, I loved how he came on strong last season. Haven't really quite seen it yet. But for as much as so much of the onus is going to be on the Miami Dolphins offense and Mike McDaniel, can he keep his job? What is Tua doing? Tyreek Hill, not as efficient as we've seen him. Jalen Waddle, all of that. The run game has not been very good either. I think it's the defense that's holding this team back even more. That when you're allowing 33 to the Colts and 31 to the Bills on the road in a game that Josh Allen didn't totally take over, and the Bills probably gave a C+ or B- effort, they still should have allowed 34 points. There was a missed field goal last Thursday in that game in Week 3 in Buffalo. It's the Dolphins defense, and most namely just the lack of star power whatsoever, and really practice squad, bottom of the roster players playing in that secondary outside of Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's the biggest issue, I think, in Miami. And lastly, I want to talk about the New England Patriots. 2 other newcomers on defense, Milton Williams, Harold Landry, together through 3 games have 19 quarterback pressures. That's exactly what you want to see from a free agent acquisition, and especially a pair like Milton Williams and Harold Landry. Obviously, Landry has a long history with Mike Vrabel from Tennessee. I didn't necessarily think that Harold Landry was going to be this type of player through 3 weeks in New England. He was always like solid in Tennessee. There were splash plays, flashes from him at times, but was never really an elite level pass rusher. But he's been really good around the edge. And then on the interior with 9 pressures through 3 games for a big defensive tackle, that's really good for Milton Williams. And he's been awesome against the run. So good on film against the run. So Drake May, I think his start's been a little bit overrated. He actually has more turnover-worthy plays thus far than big-time throws, and that's not what you want ever to see at the quarterback position. He's been accurate. He's been pretty good down the field when there's been open receivers, but he hasn't been transcendent. So I think he's been a little bit overrated. But together on defense, Milton Williams, Harold Landry, almost 20 pressures between them, which is a lot through 3 games. All right, moving now in all 32 to the AFC North. Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, they're coming off a historically bad loss in Minnesota. So many turnovers in that game. Do I think if they have only 2 or 3 turnovers instead of like the 5 that they had, do they win that game? Probably not. But it was a little bit of a fluke. And to see a 38-point loss that could have been a 45-point loss, they scored a late touchdown. You're going to have some fluky stuff happen. We're not going to see as much turnover issues in Cincinnati, even with Jake Browning behind center. I think they'll take better care of the football. What I want to focus on, though, quickly, Chase Brown, kind of a fantasy darling. I'm sure he went very early in a lot of your fantasy drafts after those elite level running backs went off the board in round 1. He's averaging 2 yards a carry. He is super talented. I don't care that he was a 6th-round pick. Chase Brown has dynamic athleticism. He was elusive in college, hit a lot of big plays at college or in college. And we saw him last season, the last 2 years really, emerge as that bona fide number 1 running back in Cincinnati. So I think it speaks to, again, one of the biggest problems in Cincinnati for a long time now, the offensive front. I think Joe Burrow's inability to avoid tacklers behind the line of scrimmage, take too many sacks when he's pressured, that probably isn't talked about enough. And I've written about that. I've posted videos on it. But up front, for as good as Dylan Fairchild has been, the day 2 guard that they selected, with Orlando Brown, with Amarius Mims, those big investments at tackle, they have not really pushed people in the run game. And I think when we've seen, even in 23, when Chase Brown broke out and Jake Browning was the quarterback, a lot better blocking up front. So only 2 yards a carry for Chase Brown. Pretty surprising. Now to the Baltimore Ravens, staying in the AFC North here in all 32. Two things that I'll maybe be a little bit longer here because I think this is really interesting. Number one, Lamar Jackson has a problem through 3 games under pressure. That means when he's pressured, you think, oh, Lamar Jackson under pressure, like he's going to make guys miss. He's going to scramble. He's going to create big plays with his arm, even throwing on the run. He's done that, especially running with the football. I think he's still the pure scariest quarterback once you get him off structure and he leaves the pocket. But his pressure to sack rate this season is almost 32% right now. And he had gotten so much better in that regard, going down in each of the last 3 seasons from like 21% a few years ago, then to 19% 2 years ago. Last year, around 11% of the time that Lamar Jackson was pressured, he was taking a sack. And like, if you are anywhere close to 10%, you are at the top of the league. Josh Allen was the best in the league last season at right around 10%. But through 3 games, and I'm not expecting Lamar Jackson to stay at 31 or almost 32%, but that's been a big issue. And I think it's probably part of the fact that Lamar Jackson understands that he can create those big plays. He's holding onto the football, seeing what he can do off structure, reversing his field, holding onto the football for a long time because he knows I can make a big play in those situations. He just hasn't done it. I mean, to take 7 sacks in that loss at home on Monday Night Football to the Lions, that was really detrimental to the Ravens losing that game. So very surprising to see him not create more, maybe not just with his legs, but throwing on the run and keeping his eyes upfield and getting the ball out. He hasn't been quite as accurate under pressure either. He does have a fair amount of yards when pressured. And I think he's got 1 touchdown under pressure. There was that crazy throw to DeAndre Hopkins in week 2's real thrashing against the Browns. But in general, for a quarterback that has been on the steady climb in terms of making plays when pressured, when either he's creating the pressure himself or his offensive line just isn't blocking well, or just a really good pass rush, it's been very surprising to see Lamar Jackson not only just not up to his standard, but actually near the bottom of the league in terms of highest pressure to sack rate. That's just not the quarterback that he's been the last couple of years. And one other point on them, staying on the topic of pass rush for the Baltimore Ravens, they have kind of a pass rush problem. Odafe Owe's pressure rate is 11.7% 3 games in. And is that low? Is that high? For edge rushers, the best in the NFL, 13, 14, 15, 16%. Some are near 20%. The Myles Garretts, the Micah Parsons, TJ Watts, the Max Crosby types, 17, 18, 19%, and get even to 20 at times. So for your number 1 rusher, if you're the Baltimore Ravens, your former first-round pick, Odafe Owe, to be at 11.7%, it's not great. They picked Mike Green in round 2. His is 6% right now. So maybe that's being unfair to a rookie pass rusher. He's 3 games into his NFL career, but 6%. They lose they didn't have Kyle Van Noy or Justin Matabuke or Nnamdi Matabuke, in that week 3 loss to the Lions. Of course that hurt. And that's, I think you have to put that into consideration for how porous the defense was in that game. I don't think they get pushed around as much against the run if Van Noy and Matabuke are on the field. But I think they still have a problem. I think this will come back to me, or I'll probably be talking about it in about 6 weeks, or whenever the trade deadline is. Was it week 8 or week 9, week 10, somewhere in that range? That don't be surprised if GM Eric DeCosta is looking to trade for some type of pass rush specialist, because right now I just don't think Tavius Robinson, they don't really have the depth or the star power to push the pocket from the outside. You saw in that game a stark contrast. It's the perfect segue. 7 sacks for Lamar Jackson, 0 for probably the least mobile quarterback in the NFL, Jared Goff. Moving down to the Cleveland Browns, Mason Graham. He was awesome in week 3's win over the Packers. 4 pressures on 24 pass rush snaps. He really looked the part. I mean, he looked like someone that deserved to be a top 5 pick. His wins were clean. They showed off dynamic athleticism. He was great against the run, stacking and shedding blockers, staying balanced, not getting pushed down the line of scrimmage on a zone run play, inside or outside zone, staying on his feet, re-engaging with blockers, and then kind of just tossing them to the side. So yes, everything is all about Myles Garrett in Cleveland, but Isaiah McGuire, the bookend edge rusher, and then Malik Collins, who has bounced around the league, but he stayed in the league because of his pass rushing prowess at defensive tackle. Add to that Mason Graham, and that's a big reason. Carson Schlesinger at linebacker behind him, who's played really well, the first pick in round 2. That's why this team is so good defensively through 3 games, because they really can get after it, and they don't have to blitz those 4 guys up front. They're starters, and they can really rotate. There's some other players too. That's why this group has been just as ferocious as any team in the NFL on defense. Mason Graham, hats off to him. Slow training camp, not a great preseason. Travis Hunter was getting all the publicity, and it's funny how quickly the script can change, just 3 weeks, less than a month into each of their respective NFL careers. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers, staying in the AFC North here on All 32, where I run through the entire NFL, give some thoughts, some stats, some opinions on all 32 teams. I'm staying in the AFC North with the last team in the AFC North, and I'll try to be a little quicker because I don't want this show to be drastically long. Nick Herbig for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hats off to him. He has stepped in very well for Alex Highsmith in the Steelers' Week 3 win over the New England Patriots. His pressure rate right now, entering Week 4, 14.9%. Now, I just talked about earlier, Odafe Oweh's 11.7%. He's rushed the passer more than Nick Herbig, but in this limited sample size, and really going back to last season, Herbig has been efficient. Like, this is a player that, I'm not saying that Alex Highsmith is overrated. I think he's still very good, but he has dealt with a lot of injuries. Nick Herbig hasn't. He has immense speed to power conversion for his size. He has an awesome outside speed rush. He just looked apart. He had a sack against Drake May, forced a fumble, and is just someone that I think can be the perfect complement. He's going to see a lot of one-on-ones because of TJ Watt. So Nick Herbig, 14.9% pressure rate entering Week 4. When I posted a TikTok video about this week, a lot of Steelers fans are like, hey, trade Alex Highsmith, get a receiver, get some better blocking. But Nick Herbig, I don't know if the Steelers will ultimately do that. I think it's good to have a good rotation. But Nick Herbig, year 3 in the NFL, he's in line, I think, right now. If he continues this play and gets a longer audition on Pittsburgh's defense, he's in for a big payday, and he's going to be an important piece to maybe the Steelers playing more Steeler-type defense over the next couple months in the season. All right, jumping down to the AFC South, Tennessee Titans. Not much to say. That's been great through 3 weeks. Calvin Ridley has 8 catches on 20 targets. Now, that's not to say that he's had 12 drops or that 12 throws from Cam Ward have been inaccurate. He's just been one of the least efficient wide receivers in the entire NFL. Alec Ayomanor, the rookie from Stanford, has actually been way more efficient. He's been more of a reliable target. To see Patrick Surtain certainly does not help. He's probably the best pure, just lockdown man-to-man corner. I'm not saying that he's automatically the best corner overall in the NFL, but for someone like Ridley that wants to win with separation, you don't want to see the length and the athleticism of Patrick Surtain. But to me, Calvin Ridley, the point I want to make is if this continues, both his inefficiency and Tennessee's losing a lot of football games, I think Calvin Ridley, who is like 30 now or 31, but has proven that he's still pretty dynamic of an athlete, I think he will be a very hot name at the trade deadline, because it seems like there's always a few teams that need that wide receiver that they think can help. We saw last year DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper get traded right before the trade deadline. Obviously, Devontae Adams as well. I think Calvin Ridley is that guy this year. And those were all like 30, 31-year-old wide receivers. Now, obviously, Ridley was never to the level of Devontae Adams or DeAndre Hopkins or really even Amari Cooper. But I think he will be a name, if this continues, and I'm thinking it will, to be a hot name at the trade deadline. Indianapolis Colts, 3-0. I could talk about Daniel Jones, his historic start, but I'm going to focus on Bernhard Raimann, their left tackle. To me, he's like, when he signed his extension this offseason, it was like, what? they signed Bernhard Raimann. Okay, great. Like he's to me like the most unknown left tackle that is playing on a very expensive deal, not ridiculously expensive, not top of the market expensive, but he's playing on a second contract that's very lucrative. And I watched his film through 3 games, been very impressed. I do think that Rymann's weaknesses coming out of Central Michigan, and I vividly remember scouting him just a few years ago, 2022. They still need to be better. He needs to be stronger at the point of attack and play with a little more nastiness. But in terms of his athleticism to track that inside move, that crossover that kind of Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons have really made famous, he's awesome at that. He is so athletic, looks like a big tight end out there. And for as much as I think there is room for improvement for Raimann to get stronger and nastier, he's improved that from where he was as kind of a raw specimen as a 3rd-round pick out of Central Michigan. I actually had a 1st-round grade on him because I just saw the athletic traits were absolutely through the roof. And if you don't believe me and just think, hey, like, what did you know about his athleticism? Check his combine workout. Bernhard Raimann, short arms, but tall, had a lot of room to grow into his frame, and athleticism with just in terms of his broad jump, his 40, his 3-cone, his short shuttle, elite level. So he has been kind of the low-key important element to this Colts 3-0 start. And it's not surprising because I think if you asked someone to name all 32 left tackles in the NFL, he would be one of the last that you would name, but he's playing on a second contract. So the Colts have been very happy with his development, and I think that's justifiably so. Houston Texans, man, 0-3 Houston Texans. They have looked like a shell of their former selves in terms of their offense, in terms of CJ Stroud. I didn't really think that I would ever see that coming after that rookie season, but it's important to keep in perspective that it's not really easy to just maintain that level of efficiency that we saw from CJ Stroud in that offensive rookie of the year type campaign. I'll quickly say, speaking of former rookies of the year, Will Anderson has been tremendous. Donnell Hunter, absolutely tremendous. I have heard his name get floated around as a potential trade deadline candidate if the Texans are like 2-6 or seem completely out of it. I don't know if that would really align with where the timeline of the Houston Texans at this point, but I'll stick on the offensive side. They went through that offensive overhaul on their offensive line, I should have said, this offseason. They got rid of 4 of 5 starters. Titus Howard was the only guy coming back. Ed Ingram, who was kind of a disappointment as a day 2 pick in Minnesota with the Vikings. They signed him. They signed Laken Tomlinson. They have Jake Andrews. No one on the inside has really been that good at all. Titus Howard has been fine. He's been clearly the best blocker. Ariante Ursary, who I absolutely loved in the pre-draft process from Minnesota, the 2nd-round pick, he's not been great, but he's a rookie. They probably weren't expecting Ariante Ursary to come in and just be Tristan Wirfs right away. I do think Ursary is relatively young, and he does have a lot of upside because he's very athletic and he's big and strong. He just had problems with pass rush moves through 3 games. But those veterans, Laken Tomlinson, Ed Ingram, and Jake Andrews, I think they have been integral to the problems that CJ Stroud has faced with a lot of pressure. They have not run the football very well. I mean, no Joe Mixon, but I don't think we kind of understand now that it's just running backs can't just come in and fix a run game. It's usually been the blocking. So hats off to the Texans' idea to not fall for the sunk cost fallacy and just say, hey, we're going to run back the same starting 5 and just hope it's better. I don't really know why they traded their best blocker, Laramie Tunsil. That seemed, in terms of a timeline and where CJ Stroud is, that seemed kind of weird. But it seems like through 3 games, the players that they selected to bring in and to acquire for that offensive line overhaul have not been very good. They just have not lived up to the contracts that they've gotten. Not that they were signed for huge deals, but they just have been the wrong player so far. Staying in the AFC South here on all 32, Jacksonville Jaguars. They have a Trevor Lawrence problem. And I know probably down in Jacksonville, there's a lot of people saying, there's been so many drops. Brian Thomas has a drop in each game. 2 were on, a 4th down and a 3rd down. Travis Hunter's dropped some passes, I believe. It hasn't been a stellar showing of the wide receiver group that we kind of thought was going to be a strength of this team. But Trevor Lawrence, for someone that, and I'll say that I fell for it, so to speak, I thought he was the best quarterback prospect at the time. I thought he was the next Andrew Luck type player. He just checked all the boxes from what he did in college, his traits, everything. Right now, Trevor Lawrence is 23rd in adjusted completion rate. And last season, he was 42nd out of 44 qualifying quarterbacks. Let me say that again. Right now, Trevor Lawrence is 23rd in the NFL in adjusted completion rate, and he's 42nd out of 44 qualifiers last year. So he has an accuracy problem. And quick shout out to Scott Barrett of Fantasy Points Data. He sent out a really interesting tweet this week that the last 3 seasons with Trevor Lawrence, they track everything very granularly at Fantasy Points. It's a great website. Even if you're not a huge fantasy person, you can learn a lot about what's going on with the game by buying their data or their fantasy data suite that they have. Last 3 seasons, Trevor Lawrence is first in the NFL in first read throw rate. So he is looking at that first read, throwing it. 22, 23, and 24. All right around 70%, 72, 73%, the highest of any qualifying quarterback in the NFL. So, and what's weird about that is one of the traits that I think everyone agreed upon with Trevor Lawrence coming out of Clemson was, he can get through reads. He's a full field reader. He's going to just glide through those progressions. To be first in the NFL 3 seasons in a row shows that's a problem. And the kicker is he's now posting his highest first read throw rate. Almost 80% of his throws are on that first read through 3 games. So that's not to say that that's bad. I mean, a lot of times if you're scheming guys up, if your coach, and they obviously have a quarterback-friendly coach in Liam Cohn, and I think they hired him to kind of be that quarterback whisperer for Trevor Lawrence, who's frankly been a little disappointing as a former number 1 overall pick, especially relative to his hype. But to have that player be at the top of the league in first read throw rate and then be near the bottom third of the league now and almost at the bottom in adjusted completion rate that, tosses aside throwaways and passes that are batted at the line, just true accuracy is really a problem for this team. All right, moving to the AFC West. Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to talk about their run game. Isaiah Pacheco, 3.7 yards per carry. Kareem Hunt, 3.5 yards per carry. And together, those 2 veteran running backs have forced 5 missed tackles through 3 games. And when we think of the Kansas City Chiefs, of course, we think Andy Reid, we think Patrick Mahomes. But we also, like the ball knowers and the people that are even casual fans, you see so many primetime Kansas City Chiefs games, you understand they are awesome in the trenches. Creed Humphrey's the highest paid center in the league. Trey Smith is a very handsomely paid right guard. Now, they did lose Joe Thuney, so maybe that's kind of what's the reason that this run game has really struggled. But Kingsley Suamataia, the 2nd-round pick that they tried to tackle last season, uber talented. He's got a wide body, long, very, very long arms, big wingspan. He's playing left guard. He hasn't really pushed people on a consistent basis and created those big lanes because we know Isaiah Pacheco runs as hard as any back in the league. We know Kareem Hunt knows Andy Reid's system from his, first stint in Kansas City. But for both of those running backs to be under 4 yards a carry and only force 5 missed tackles through 3 games has been, I think, an underrated part of why the Chiefs have not looked that great offensively. I know Patrick Mahomes is going to make his plays, and maybe he could be a little better. Maybe Andy Reid could be a little better. And I think they both will be better when more of the receivers come back, when you get Xavier Worthy back and you get Rashee Rice back. But the run game has kind of been, even when they won those back-to-back Super Bowls, it was, man, they could really run the football. They can get a lead and then just pound you between the tackles because of the interior that they have. So I think Joe Thuney, maybe the low-key biggest loss for the Chiefs this offseason. Now moving to the Los Angeles Chargers, the 3-0 Los Angeles Chargers leading the AFC West through 3 games. I do a series on my TikTok every week called The Best Throw, and it was a no-brainer this week. Justin Herbert's touchdown in the 4th quarter to Keenan Allen, where he tossed aside Zach Allen in the pocket, which that in and of itself is insane. Rolls left. After he does that, he sees another All-Pro, Nick Bonito, right next to him, and he's running to his left. So he's like against his natural momentum of throwing the football. Throws a football that actually, as he releases it, hits the elbow of Nick Bonito. He's got his left arm up like you should. hits Nick Bonito's arm, and then with his other hand, Nick Bonito hits Justin Herbert directly in the face mask, and the ball is perfectly placed to a tightly covered Keenan Allen. The best throw that I saw this past week. And I will quickly talk too about the idea that Justin Herbert, or the fact that Justin Herbert has the most passing yards in the NFL at 860 entering week 4. I don't think anyone on earth had that on their bingo card before the season. We thought this is going to be ground and pound again. He's going to, make some plays when he needs to, but it's year 2 of Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. No, they've thrown the ball all over the lot. And it hasn't been just the Ladd McConkey show. Quentin Johnston has played great. Keenan Allen has been a great end of summer acquisition. And then Ladd's certainly done his part as that possession guy over the middle, create some big plays at the intermediate level. So 860 yards through 3 games. That's the most in the NFL, and it belongs to Justin Herbert. Denver Broncos, almost done with the AFC here. 2 more teams. Denver Broncos. I got to just focus on J.K. Dobbins because really Bo Nix has not played very well. But J.K. Dobbins is tied for the lead in the NFL. J.K. Dobbins, who's had 50 injuries through 5 years in his career. He is tied for the lead in the NFL with 7 rushes of over 10 yards, tied with James Cook and Jonathan Taylor. I said it earlier in the show. Very impressive. I think he's the most persistent, resilient, whatever you want to say, running back in the NFL. The back-to-back knee ligament tears, then the Achilles tear. Then he was actually good last season and played 12 games in Los Angeles with the Chargers. And we thought, hey, he finally shucked kind of got rid of the problems with injury. But then week 12 comes along and J.K. Dobbins sprains his MCL and he's placed on injured reserve. We thought, man, can this guy take another? Not only can he just take it mentally, but can his body withstand so many knee ligament and leg tears? He's done it. He looks the part. He looks as healthy as ever. It's very, very impressive. This early on, after suffering that MCL tear or sprain, which the sprain and a tear, I don't really ever, it seems like a sprain is a smaller version of a tear that's all the way across. I'm not, I have no medical background, so I don't really know that. But very impressive to see it happen that late in the season last year for J.K. Dobbins. And 7 carries of 10-plus yards, averaging over 5 yards a carry. Hats off to J.K. Dobbins, who's really been able to stave off R.J. Harvey, a big draft crush of mine, and a lot of other people, big-time athlete out of UCF. He's really been able to stave him off. He is the bell cow running back in Sean Payton's offense entering week 4. And last but not least in the AFC, Ashton Genty. We got to talk about him. It's been bad, averaging under 3.5 yards per carry, but it's been the blocking. And it's not just individually. I think Alex Kappa, Donald Parham have to play better at guard. Jackson Powers-Johnson has been okay. Colton Miller is a better pass protector than he is run blocker, but he's fine at left tackle. But Ashton Genty is actually 4th in missed tackles forced, with 13 of those through 3 games. So it's not like Ashton Genty is just Trent Richardson 2.0 entering this final week of September in the NFL season. The blocking has not been good. And when I said earlier, it's not just been the individuals. A lot of creativity with Chip Kelly's offense. A lot of asking the left guard to climb to the second level and hook around the left tackle, and he's coming to the inside block. It's a lot of moving parts. I mean, yes, they run inside zone like every team does. They run outside zone like just about every team does. There's some power elements, but there's a lot of pin and pull. I think it's going to take time for what is probably not that talented of an offensive front. I mean, I do think Jackson Powers-Johnson and Colton Miller have the big-time athleticism that you need, but it's going to take time for those blockers up front to just understand all the intricacies and the angles and the leverage that they need to utilize in this Chip Kelly-based offense. So Ashton Genty, if you're a fantasy owner of Ashton Genty, you're pretty bummed at his start, but it's not been on him. His yards after contact per rush is still very high. It's pretty sure it's close to 4 yards per carry, which is really, that's especially early in the season, that's the ultimate threshold. If you're at 4, you're doing a great job after contact, but he's forced 13 missed tackles, which is the 4th most in the NFL. All right, moving over to the NFC. And before I do that, I'm just going to remind everyone what you're listening to and what you're watching. This is All 32. Every week, I'm going to come on here, hopefully, and give a stat nugget, my thoughts, what I've seen on the film for all 32 teams in the NFL. I'm jumping over now to the NFC. Philadelphia Eagles, they have a pass rush problem. And it's what's interesting is there's a pass rush problem, I think, in Baltimore with Odafe Owe, Mike Green not necessarily playing well. That's a Super Bowl contender on the AFC side. The defending Super Bowl champs, they have a pass rush problem too. They just placed Nolan Smith on injured reserve, and he's really been and has, I think they want him to step into a prominent role as like the best edge rusher on the team. You know, Hassan Reddick's gone. Bryce Huff is not there anymore. He's in San Francisco. They lose Josh Sweat in the offseason. They lose Milton Williams. So to place him on IR, you're now going to lean on Patrick Johnson. This is in no particular order. Patrick Johnson, Josh Uche, Obo Okoronkwo, who is kind of an old school draft crush of mine from 2018, but has bounced around the league, been a solid player, but never a great player. I think Jalix Hunt is going to get more rushes, and I really liked what I saw from him, particularly in the playoffs and the Super Bowl. But he's a former Houston Baptist safety. I think he's still somewhat raw in his second season. I think, in the middle with Jalen Carter, who is the best player on the defense, Jordan Davis, who looks a little better having slimmed down. They're going to create push on the inside, but it's the outside that I'm a little concerned about with the Philadelphia Eagles. So take note of that and pay attention to that when you're watching the next few Eagles games. How do they get after the quarterback on the outside? Are they going to have to blitz more? And that's really not the marquee of that team. That's not a trademark. They like to get after it like we saw in the Super Bowl with their front four. And when you have Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and Nolan Smith's kind of your, rotational edge rusher, along with Jalen Carter in the middle and Jordan Davis in the middle, then you're cooking with gas. And we saw that really bear fruit for the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Now, with Nolan Smith going to miss the next month, I think we're going to see more times in which the Eagles just aren't able to get to the opposing quarterback because they have to get too exotic with, and sure, maybe the blitzes get home, but it's going to leave the cornerbacks more exposed. I think the Eagles have a pass rush problem, despite their 3-0 start. And it's been a very impressive 3-0 start. Dallas, I'll be quick with them. I think the Cowboys have the worst defense in the NFL. I mean, I talked about the Miami Dolphins in the first segment about the AFC East. They are actually last in EPA per play allowed in non-garbage time. You know who's 31st? The Dallas Cowboys. In those non-garbage time situations, they are 31st in EPA per play allowed. And Kenny Clark got hurt in week 3. They have Deron Bland, who's always battling injuries seemingly. Trevon Diggs battled injuries, and it's not that 6 or 7 interception per season player anymore. Who else do they have on defense? Mozzie Smith is I don't want to say colossal bust because he was a back half of the first round or back third of the first round selection a few years ago. He hasn't become this Dexter Lawrence type player. Leighton Vander Esch retired a few years ago. I just don't really know who they have. Demarion Overshown injured again at linebacker, has certainly flashed when he's played. I like Donovan Wilson. I don't think he's an elite level or even approaching an elite level safety. And they're leaning on Sam Williams. They're leaning on Marshawn Nealand, 2 former day 2 picks at edge. They just, if you look at the roster, it's not as though a lot of, star players are just underperforming. I just think they have their from front to back on the defensive side of the ball. They just have a bottom, probably the worst roster along with the Miami Dolphins. And I think it's going to, if you got Dak Prescott, if you got George Pickens, and when CeeDee Lamb returns, great. I think Javonte Williams has played very well. I think the offense can score a lot of points, but the Dallas Cowboys are going to be in a lot of 38-35, 41-38, 34-24 type games just because I think their defense is the worst in the NFL. All right, Washington Commanders. I got to just talk about Bill Merritt. He's averaging 5.7 yards per carry, 3.8 yards after contact per rush. So this is a rookie. He doesn't look particularly big on film, but he's like 5'10", over 200 pounds. He has, I don't want to say a classic NFL feature back frame, but he's big enough for today's NFL. Certainly, it used to be, 5 to 10 years ago that you wanted those running backs to be at least 200 pounds. I don't think you necessarily need to be that big. And if you're at 200 pounds and you're not 6'1" or 6'2", which would be really tall at running back, you're completely fine in terms of your height to weight ratio. But he really creates after contact. He did it at New Mexico. He did it for the one game at Arizona that we saw him, and he's a big-time athlete. So I think we should see more of Bill Merritt now with Austin Eckler. It's going to be his second game on injury reserve out for the season. He's just been the most efficient rusher in this offense. And Marcus Mariota is going to have to lean, I think, a little bit, and his offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, lean on the run game and lean on a 7th-round rookie, Bill Krosky-Merritt, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, averaging almost 6 yards a carry and almost 4 yards after contact per rush, which are both tremendous numbers. Yes, small sample size, but that's what you want to see in this early sample size, especially from a running back that probably got the most hype that I've ever seen a 7th-round rookie get. Jackson Dart for the New York Giants. Obviously got to talk about him. What more can I say than this was the most obvious, needed move for this team that is sitting 0-3. I did a film video for TikTok right after that horrific Giants offensive performance in the Sunday Night Football loss at home to the Chiefs. Russell Wilson in that game was making all of the mistakes and not executing in a way that you normally see a rookie do it. You're normal. Oh man, the rookie can't get to the second read. Russell Wilson can't get to a second read. Oh, it was second and goal and he didn't like what he saw in the first read. So inside the pocket, he just threw the ball into the stands, intentional grounding. Oh, it's 4th down. Oh, he threw the ball into the stands again. Didn't give anyone a chance. Those are characteristics of what we normally see from a rookie quarterback. And Russell Wilson is making those in like year 13 in the NFL, year 14 in the NFL. So it's absolutely time for Brian Daboll and the whole decision-making process, the team there in New York or with the Giants to start Jackson Dart. I think he's going to give the team the juice that it needs entering week 4. Do I think he's going to come in and be Jaden Daniels? Probably not. But he's very athletic. He played for a quote-unquote NFL offensive coordinator, head coach in Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. It was very gimmicky offense, but I think he can get through his reads somewhat. I think the problem with Dart will be he trusts his arm a little bit too much and thinks he can make every single throw. His arm is good. It's not tremendous. There'll be mistakes. He's a rookie. He's going to be starting his first NFL game, but there's no way that Jackson Dart is going to be worse than what Russell Wilson, outside of that Cowboys game against the worst defense in the NFL, how bad he looked through 3 games. In 2 of the 3 games, Russell Wilson just looked terrible. So there's no way that Jackson Dart will be as bad as Russell Wilson. And the defense has actually played pretty well. So I think now the Giants can start to at least be more competitive offensively with Jackson Dart, a rookie starting at quarterback. All right, now all 32 moving to the NFC North, Green Bay Packers. A lot we can get to. It's such a strange loss, a weird fluky-ish loss in Cleveland last week. But I'm going to focus on Devontae Wyatt, former first-round pick, kind of quietly just played okay, not great the last couple of years. Out of Georgia on those national title-winning Georgia Bulldog teams, was one of the last picks in the first round a few years ago. He's really come into his own. And I do think part of it is the Micah Parsons effect, that he's drawing a lot more doubles on the outside. So those players on the interior are playing a lot better football. But if you have Micah Parsons, you got Rashawn Gary opposite him. And now if Devontae Wyatt continues what has been a really good start with 13 quarterback pressures through 3 games, and even Lucas Van Ness, who's been I think flat out disappointment as a top 20 selection just 2 years ago, he started to play a lot better football. Those players on the inside, along with like the rotational pieces like Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden, who I loved coming out of Auburn, then I really think that's part of why we've seen this Packers defense play so well, and it will continue to play well if this continues, this type of pass rush play from Devontae Wyatt. Chicago Bears, the Packers' biggest rival. He's starting to get it. I think Caleb Williams is really starting to play quality football. Now, it's so funny how the narrative can change. That after week 2, it was, oh my God, like what, so much narrative about, because we got to see kind of behind the curtain from Tyler Dunn in his Go Long TD article, like the decision-making process for the Bears was maybe not exactly kosher, what you want to necessarily see from a team with the first pick in the draft deciding on a quarterback. Is it Caleb Williams? Is it Jaden Daniels? But that's not, that has nothing to do with Williams himself. After that second game, it was, did they make the wrong decision? Is Ben Johnson the right guy? Is he going to move on from him? He has no ties to him. He took the job because of Caleb Williams. And I've weirdly felt like I've had to defend Caleb which I have no reason to. I just, from what I've seen, the sacks were a problem last year. He certainly held the ball way too long, but against the worst defense in the NFL, that's what I'm calling it, the Dallas Cowboys. Not only did we see the splash plays, the flea flicker, the great throw to Odunze that was just a rocket down the left sideline, the flea flicker to Luther Burden, he was taking the check down. You would see there would be a triangle read on the left or right side of the field, and the normal Caleb Williams wants to try to fit it into the point of the triangle downfield. He was, it's maybe not there. I'm gonna check it down to DeAndre Swift. I'm gonna check it down to Cole Kmet. We're gonna get 7 yards, and it's gonna be 2nd and 3 instead of 2nd and 10. So just like I think I tweeted it after week 1, it was like, all right, second half against Minnesota was bad, but I think it's gonna take time for Caleb Williams to understand, look, I have the ability to make all the throws, but I need to understand that Ben Johnson is as good of a play designer and schemer as anyone in the NFL. I need to play within structure a little bit more. And even though we saw the splash plays against Dallas, he played within, I think, the confines of what Ben Johnson wants from his offense a lot more frequently in week 3. Minnesota Vikings. I'm just going to go obvious here. If you follow me on any social media platform, I'm going to talk about Jordan Mason. He is a gigantic draft crusher of mine. My draft algorithm, Resin, had him as the number 1 running back in the 2022 draft class, and he went undrafted. So that perked my ears up. This undrafted guy was the number 1 player in my NFL draft predictive algorithm. Didn't think anything of it. All right, undrafted, signs with the 49ers, whatever. Great with the 49ers. Awesome to start his career in Minnesota. I love that trade, even though I'm not a big trade assets or pay veteran running back type guy. I loved that, especially given Aaron Jones' age. And I'm not going to say that I predicted the injury, but at 31, after a lot of carries in Green Bay, and certainly last season with that 1,100-yard year that Aaron Jones had, that's when we normally start to see running backs either just drop in efficiency or just break down physically. Jordan Mason, to have him as that 1B to Aaron Jones 1A, and I thought all offseason he's going to take over as the lead back. Now he is, with Aaron Jones injured. So Jordan Mason, I'm looking at my notes here. He's 4th in the NFL in yards per carry among the running backs who have 40 or more carries. So Jordan Mason is 4th in the NFL in yards per carry among those running backs who have 40 or more carries. The yards after contact has been great. Maybe not been quite as elusive as I expected, but I think that will come. I mean, we saw that last season in that long audition when Christian McCaffrey was injured in San Francisco. So Jordan Mason, hats off to him. He's been really, really good as now the feature back in Minnesota. Staying in the AFC North, or NFC North, I should say, the Detroit Lions. I posted a video about the long David Montgomery run against the Baltimore Ravens, and then the long touchdown at the end of the game where he could have just slid and ended the game, but I guess wanted to get into the end zone. I don't blame him. It is such a team effort run, in this Lions run game. And I think you hear coaches, we want everyone to block. We want physicality. You don't really get that very frequently. And of course, up front, Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker is just this, he doesn't age. He's been there since 2016 as a first rounder. Very good at left tackle. Guys on the interior, they lost some pieces, but have still blocked really well. And I think Tate Ratledge, their day 2 pick out of Georgia, has been awesome. I believe he's playing right guard. Christian Mahogany's playing left guard. They've been good, but I actually wanted to highlight Khalif Raymond and Jameson Williams and even Amon-Ra St. Brown. These are not big wide receivers. Jameson Williams looks like Devontae Smith 2.0 at times. He's so spindly and skinny. They truly get after it in the run game. And I think that's why we see, not just because Jahmyr Gibbs is so explosive, but you can see someone like David Montgomery, who's really best laterally. He is not a speedster. He was not at Iowa State. He's never been a speedster. Break off a 67-yard run or whatever it was against Baltimore and have the long run to kind of seal the deal in that game. So hats off to the truly, genuinely team effort that the Detroit Lions put on, I think, on a weekly basis, especially with those receivers on the outside in their run game. Now, moving to the NFC South with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I posted a video on TikTok this week. I have to talk about him. Jamel Dean, I think, is the most underrated cornerback in the NFL. I really think Jamel Dean is the most underrated cornerback in the NFL. Never been to a Pro Bowl. He had 17 pass breakups as a rookie. Has never really rekindled that type of production since then, but he's always 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pass breakups, a few interceptions every season. He tackles really well. And I think he's still, at his age, he was a first-round pick in 2019, or he was not a first-round pick. He was I'm totally blank, maybe a second or third rounder in 2019. He still has some of the best recovery speed in the NFL. He tested through the roof coming out of Auburn, and I loved him on film at Auburn. There are times where he looks a little stiff in the hips, and you're like, oh, man, these quicker separators are just going to lose him in coverage. It's almost like I don't want to say he waits to allow separation, but he's not super nervous and doesn't get into panic mode where he's drawing a lot of flags because he knows that he can just click on the accelerators and get back to the football. He had an interception, a pick six late in that first half against the Jets. Had another one that was nullified by a flag, but he tackles well. I just think Jamel Dean, even after Carlton Davis has been long gone now there for the last couple of seasons, opposite him, Jamel Dean is one of the most, if not the most underrated corner in football. Carolina Panthers, I'm a little concerned about Bryce Young. The defense played well against Atlanta. I mean, going back to watch the film, it seemed like just more poor play from Michael Penix and Atlanta's offense, just some real precarious throws, hurried, inaccurate, more so than like, man, they really got after Michael Penix. They really, covered extremely well. The line, it wasn't that. So it's like I wanted to focus on the defense at first, but I haven't really seen a star player or a star trend or very exciting trend emerge on the defensive side. So I want to focus on Bryce Young. Bryce Young has 3 big-time throws to 5 turnover-worthy plays through 3 games. He's averaging just over 5 yards per attempt. And this is year 3. Like, if this was his rookie season and it was 3 games in, you'd say, okay, he's a rookie. They just won a game in the division. It's fine. He's in year 3 now. And year 1 was disastrous. The first 3 or 4 games of year 2, even worse, gets benched for Andy Dalton, comes back and does play pretty good football, not elite level football, but like top half of the league football at quarterback. Through 3 games, it has not been great. So keep an eye on the trend, because for as good as maybe you are hoping that the Panthers can be with this roster on the defensive side, if things don't improve drastically for Bryce Young, then this team is just going to have problems getting out of the basement, even in the NFC South. Atlanta Falcons. I just talked about Michael Penix, so I'll just, I'll allude back to that. His footwork is bad. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm a quarterback guru, mechanics coach, but I have watched a lot of quarterbacks over the last 10 plus years, 15 plus years, coming into the NFL during the draft process. Penix has his arm, his arm strength is elite. I think it is one of the top 5 to 7 just pure arms in the NFL. Does he create the right amount of torque and extra power with his body and his trunk and his feet? No. So because of that, I actually think he's like a top 7 to 10 to 12 arm in the NFL, because he often overstrides, or he's making a throw, obviously as a lefty, say down the left numbers, like on the left side of the field. Instead of stepping right toward his target or maybe a little bit open, he's like wide open. He's like stepping like you think he's throwing it down the seam or to the numbers on the right side of the field, and it's just all arm. The pick six, Shaw Smith-Wade had the interception like deep in his own end. Michael Penix is like looking down the middle of the field and just like flicks it to the left to a check down. Never. And when you're doing that, you're not able to see to where you're throwing the football. He really needs to fix his footwork. I don't know if that can be done in the middle of a season, but it's been something that's been a big problem I've seen on film. Even when they looked good, when that offense looked good in the win over Minnesota, a lot of throws where he just thinks, oh, I can just kind of be cavalier about this and just kind of flick it over to the left or over to the right. Your footwork has to be better if you're Michael Penix. All right, last division here on all 32, where I'm running through just thoughts, tidbits, stat nuggets for all 32 teams after week 3. San Francisco 49ers. Should the San Francisco 49ers, this is going to sound crazy, should they move Christian McCaffrey to the slot? That came up like when he was early in his career in Carolina, where the blocking wasn't good. His run game efficiency was not great. There was thoughts like, just move him to slot receiver. He's so good in the slot. Obviously, he's an elite level running back, and he's proven that he can play running back and be an all-pro running back in the NFL. But at this stage of his career, the 49ers have used him in the slot more than he ever has since that rookie season in 2017 in Carolina. 21% of Christian McCaffrey's routes have come in the slot this season. You normally just are catching passes in the screen game, on swing passes, but they're like using him there more than he ever has. He was like right around 21% in that rookie season in Carolina. 2.09 yards per route run. That is big time. I mean, if you're a full-time wide receiver, if you're above 2, that's kind of the threshold that you want to be. And that's like the Pro Bowl, all pro caliber type players. If you're above 2 yards per route run, running backs can be a little higher because they usually have lower volume. But Christian McCaffrey seeing 8, 9, 10 targets a game, maybe you could prolong his career and have him not take as much punishment between the tackles. If you're playing him in the slot 25, 30, 40% of the time, he's still a dynamic athlete. He's still going to see a lot of mismatches against linebackers, against safeties in the slot. Now, he could see more just straight up slot corners that could match his quickness, but he's like 6 foot, 200 plus pounds. He's bigger and can probably body a lot of those smaller, like 5'8", 5'9", 170, 180 pound slot corners. So just an idea that I've had from watching the film and just seeing how good he has been in the slot, and that he's really been there more frequently through these first 3 games than we've seen dating all the way back to his rookie season in 2017. Arizona Cardinals. I think a Trey Benson explosion is coming. He is one of my favorite running backs over the last couple of years. He's averaging over 4 yards after contact per rush. I said it earlier, I think in the first segment, James Cook is at 3.74. That's really high. Trey Benson, on a relatively low sample size, is over 4. So he's tall. He runs high. I get that. I vividly remember scouting him at Florida State just last year. Loved him. He was my number 1 running back. But he's over 4. So even despite the fact that Trey Benson does not have the low center of gravity that the Cam Scadaboos, and he just popped into my head because he's so squatty, that those running backs have, over 4 yards after contact per rush. He's forced 7 missed tackles, and I wrote 21 for some reason. I'm totally blanking why. Maybe that's on 21 carries. He's been really efficient. He's averaging over 5 yards a carry. Trey Benson with James Conner, and it's a shame to see James Conner go down with an injury. He's been so resilient and been so sneaky good. I think he's been the most underrated running back in the NFL for a while now. It's Trey Benson's job, and I think we are going to see an eruption from someone who is not just skilled at creating yards after contact and making guys miss. He ran under 4.4. Like, he can absolutely fly, and if he gets in the open field, he can get those long strides going and hit some big plays for this Cardinals offense. 2 more teams to go in all 32 for week 3. Torrey Horton, Seattle Seahawks. Got to talk about him, especially because his offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, I think someone asked him this week, like, oh, who does he remind you of? He instantly smiled and said, Justin Jefferson. Like, whoa. And sure, coaches are going to, maybe heap praise on their wide receivers or just on their players in general that might be a little excessive or overly biased. But that kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit that he mentioned Justin Jefferson, because Torrey Horton kind of has a Justin Jefferson type body. He was very productive early in his career at Nevada, transfers to Colorado State, has back-to-back 1,000+ yard seasons, and then got injured in his final campaign with the Rams. That's probably why he was a 5th-round pick. Tested through the roof. I loved him as a draft prospect. He's kind of Justin Jefferson-like, where when he's running routes, because he's like tall and spindly, he looks awkward, but he creates separation. Has the punt return touchdown last week against the Saints, has 2 other touchdowns receiving this season. Watch out for him emerging as, even as a 5th-round rookie, a day 3 pick, as the legitimate number 2 to Jackson Smith and Jigba over the now, 31 or 32-year-old Cooper Kupp. And last but not least, the 2-1 Rams. Matthew Stafford has been awesome. Like, he's ageless. He looks like he did 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. His big-time throw rate is 8% through 3 games. That is ridiculously high. Now, again, small sample. We got to keep that all in mind with all of this analysis. But the best quarterbacks in the NFL, the Josh Allen, who's really just dominated this statistic for years now, by the end of the season, like, Josh Allen has been like around 6, 7, maybe 8%. So we're seeing that type of big time throw rate from Matthew Stafford, who's getting close to 40 through 3 games. He's been really, really good. Puka, I mean, just talk about efficiency. Matthew Stafford, as efficient in terms of creating those highly difficult, challenging throws, better than any quarterback in the NFL that's thrown a fair amount of passes through 3 games. Puka Nacua led the NFL in yards per route run, which is the ultimate receiver metric last season. It was like close to 4, which is bananas, or it was over 3, which is nuts. It's at 4.11 right now. Puka Nacua's yards per route run is 4.11 yards through 3 games. So he's not run like a ridiculous amount of routes, but when he's been on the field, they're not only targeting him, he's catching the football, and he's being super duper efficient. All right, guys, that'll do it for me today, right at 1 hour, which is actually kind of what I was aiming for. I first thought 30 minutes, but I thought, how am I doing 32 teams in 30 minutes? I want to give some more analysis than just a quick 1 or 2 sentence opinion. Hopefully you liked the first episode of all 32. Thanks again for watching, and until next week, peace.